The boy went to look for the Englishman. He wanted to tell him about Fatima. He was surprised when he saw that the Englishman had built himself a furnace outside his tent. It was a strange furnace, fueled by firewood, with a transparent flask heating on top. As the Englishman stared out at the desert, his eyes seemed brighter than they had when he was reading his books. "This is the first phase of the job," he said. "I have to separate out the sulfur. To do that successfully, I must have no fear of failure. It was my fear of failure that first kept me from attempting master work. Now I'm beginning to see what I could have started 10 years ago, but I'm happy at least that I didn't wait 20 years. He continued to feed the fire, and the boy stayed on until the desert turned pink in the setting sun. He felt the urge to go out into the desert to see if the silence held the answers to his questions. He wandered for a while, keeping the date palms of the oasis within sight. He listened to the wind, and he felt the stones beneath his feet. Here and there he found a shell and realized that the desert in remote times had been a sea. He sat on a stone and allowed himself to become hypnotized by the horizon. He tried to deal with the concept of love as distinct from possession, and couldn't separate them. But Fatima was a woman of the desert, and if anything could help him understand, it was the desert. As he sat there thinking, he sensed movement above him. Looking up, he saw a pair of hawks flying high in the sky. That was an omen for me once. Actually, like 3 or 4 different times. He watched the hawks as they drifted on the wind. Although their flight appeared to have no pattern, it made a certain kind of sense to the boy. It was just that he couldn't grasp what it meant. He followed the movement of the birds, trying to read something into it. Maybe these desert birds could explain to him the meaning of love without ownership. He felt sleepy. In his heart, he wanted to remain awake, but he also wanted to sleep. "I'm learning the language of the world, and everything in the world is beginning to make sense to me, even the flight of hawks," he said to himself. And in that mood, he was grateful to be in love. When you are in love, things make more sense, he thought. Suddenly, one of the hawks made a flashing dive through the sky, attacking the other. As it did so, a sudden, fleeting image came to the boy. An army with its swords at the ready, riding into the oasis. The vision vanished immediately, but it had shaken him. He had heard people speak of mirages, and he had already seen some himself. They were desires that, because of their intensity, materialized over the sands of the desert. But he certainly didn't desire that an army invade the oasis. He wanted to forget about the vision and return to his meditation. He tried again to concentrate on the pink shades of the desert and its stones. There was something there in his heart that wouldn't let him allow it to do so. "Always heed the omens," the old king had said. The boy recalled what he had seen in the vision and sensed that it was actually going to occur. He rose. He made his way back toward the palm trees. Once again he perceived the many languages and things about him. This time, the desert was safe, and it was the oasis that had become dangerous. The camel driver was seated at the base of the palm tree observing the sunset. He saw the boy appear from the other side of the dunes. "An army is coming," the boy said. "I had a vision." "The desert fills men's hearts with visions," the camel driver answered. But the boy told him about the hawks, and that he had been watching their flight, and he suddenly felt himself to plunge into the soul of the world. The camel driver understood what the boy was saying. He knew that any given thing on the face of the earth could reveal the history of all things. One could open a book to any page, or look to a person's hand. One could turn a card, or watch the flight of the birds. Whatever the thing observed, one could find a connection with his experience of the moment. Actually, it wasn't that those things in themselves revealed anything at all. It was just that the people looking at what was occurring around them could find means of penetration to the soul of the world. The desert was full of men who earned their livings based on the ease with which they could penetrate to the soul of the world. They were known as seers, and they were held in fear by women and the elderly. Okay, some seers are women, Carter. Tribesmen were also wary of consulting them because it would be impossible to be effective in battle if one knew It would be impossible to be effective in battle if one knew that he was fated to die. The tribesmen preferred the taste of battle and the thrill of not knowing the outcome would be. The future was already written by Allah, and what he had written was always for the good of man. So the tribesmen lived only for the present, because the present was full of surprises, and they had to be aware of many things. Where was the enemy's sword? Where was his horse? What kind of blow should one deliver next in order to remain alive? The camel driver was not a fighter. He had not consulted with seers. Many of them had been right about what they had said, while some had been wrong. Then one day the oldest seer he had ever sought out, and the one most to be feared, had asked why the camel driver was so interested in the future. Well, so I can do things, he had responded, and so I can change those things that I don't want to happen. But then they wouldn't be part of your future, the seer had said. Well, maybe I just want to know the future so I can prepare myself for what's coming. If good things are coming, be pleasant surprised, said the seer. If bad things are, you know in advance you will suffer greatly before they even occur. I want to know about the future because I'm a man, the camel driver had said to the seer. And men always live to see their lives based on the future. The seer was a specialist in casting of twigs, and he threw them on the ground and made interpretations based on how they fell. That day he didn't make a cast. He wrapped the twigs in a piece of cloth and put them back in his bag. I make my living forecasting the future for people, he said. I know the science of twigs, and I know how to use them to penetrate to the place where all is written. There I can read the past, discover what has already been forgotten, and understand the omens that are here in the present. When people consult me, it's not that I'm reading the future, I'm guessing at the future. The future belongs to God, and it is only He who reveals it under extraordinary circumstances. How do I guess at the future? Based on the omens of the present. The secret is here in the present. If you pay attention to the present, you can improve upon it. And if you improve upon the present, what comes later will also be better. Forget about the future. Live each day according to the teachings, confident that God loves His children. Each day in itself brings with it an eternity. The camel driver had asked what the circumstances were under which God would allow him to see the future. Only when He Himself reveals it, and God rarely reveals the future. And God is not a man, it's collective consciousness. Mother Earth, the universe. So when He does so, when the universe does so, it's for only one reason. It's the future that was written so it as to be altered. God had shown the boy a part of the future, the camel driver thought. Why was it that He wanted the boy to serve as His instrument? Go and speak to the tribal chieftains, said the camel driver. Tell them about the armies that are approaching. They'll laugh at me. They are men of the desert, and the men of the desert are used to dealing with omens. Well, then they probably already know. They're not concerned with that right now. They believe that if they have to know about something Allah wants them to know, someone will tell them about it. It has happened many times before, but this time, the person is you. The boy thought of Fatima, and he decided he would go see the chiefs of the tribe. Oh, I love you.